Hello and welcome to the Brand Hunch podcast, where we explore ideas and hunches around how marketers are growing great brands. It's a look under the hood at how much is marketing science and how much is built on a hunch. I'm Lindsay Rogers. My day job is managing director at Cello, and this podcast started as a little project to uncover the magic and importance of having a hunch in today's marketing landscape. Today my guest is Matt Gudge. Matt was Group Marketing Director at Big Red Group, where we first met. He's then had a stint at the scale-up Mabel, the disability support platform. His last two roles have been in health tech as CMO at Health Engine. You probably use this to book a doctor's appointment, and now over at MedX in finance. Tony Westlake, who's a prior guest on the show at Big Red Group, raves about your marketing prowess, Matt, so I'm very excited to learn more. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, you've held a variety of roles over the years. What is it about marketing that really drew you in and has kept you over the years?
Yes, great question. I didn't know about marketing at all when I first started, and I think that was really interesting for me to go out on a whole realm of different jobs and other things, and then eventually found myself starting a gym with a business partner. And while we were doing that for the 4.5, 5 years that we were running the gym and doing everything that comes with running a business when you're like 20 something, which is mostly freaking out about all the stuff you've got to do. The one thing that I kind of became obsessed with was growing the gym, and not necessarily because of the monetary things, but because of all the really fun things that you could do to do that. So we bought smart cars when they first came out, and our gym was called Zest Health and Fitness. So we made them bright orange in a small town that kind of stood out. We went to local towns and all the experiential things you would expect a gym to do now. But when you're that age and you've got no idea, like that felt like really fun. And then from that fell into advertising through different connections with people, and then lots and lots and lots of interviews at Leo's. And then once I was at Leo's, I loved it. Everything about it, the creativity, the curiosity, the challenge, the numbers, just all of it. And then I think every single day is different. And we love a good chat, marketers. You know, we never stop. So I think it's good fun.
What did you take from those sort of foundational years of building the gym that you've kept sort of in good stead in the years to follow?
I think the biggest one that's carried with me in my life, which sounds really strange, is that it should always feel like your money. And I think in marketing, we can get a bit carried away with the way stuff costs money and how that plays out, and having that in the back of your mind always with value, not necessarily cost, but with creating value with the money you're going to spend, because it is somebody's money. And at some point, you're going to have to justify that. So starting out with your own kind of business and your own liability and the absolute fear that goes with that definitely is carried with me in everything we've done. And then also just, you probably can do it is another thing. You know, and you know, you guys would be across this all the time in creative agencies. One thing I love the most about, you know, starting a business or about marketing generally is that, like, you probably can. Like, there's someone somewhere that's like brave enough, stupid enough, you know, bold enough to like do it. And then somehow you always find a way. So working in a big creative agency, some of the stuff we managed to reduce, you look back and you're like, wow, I can't believe it happened. So I think they're probably the big things for me.
Amazing. Throw me back to your time at Big Red Group. You were there for sort of 4.5 years. What did you come in to achieve, and what did you end up doing?
Yeah, I was at Big Red Group for about 4.5 years. And when I started, I was the head of marketing. And Matt Gudge, who's the chief growth officer there and an incredible human, he definitely brought me in with a bit of a nervousness, because I was agency side before, had never really been properly client side other than kind of my own things off to the side. But he wanted, I think, to bring in creativity and consistency into the business and the brand. So that was kind of a big thing for me. I remember sitting in the interview and Matt was like, "So what do you know about Google Analytics?" And at the time I was like, "Google? I don't know." You know, like being kind of creative side and commercial side, it was a bit different. So I had a lot to learn going in, and I was really excited to take on the depths of e-commerce and the understanding of that space. But also then really to lift the brand creatively and to build Red Balloon up. And then in my time there, it went from obviously making Red Balloon famous to Adrenaline to Lime and Tonic to If Only to Adrenaline and all the other brands, and then shifting focus from really building Red Balloon as the business and the brand and with the team that we had there to building the Big Red Group. And that was such an incredible business. And all of the brands are so different in their own ways. And it was such a fun challenge. So, you know, I think when I joined, the team was like me plus two. when I left, I think it was me plus 16 or something. And we had multiple brands. It went from 1 to 5 and then down to 3. And it was just an incredible team there. So I think, I went from hoping to build great creative and build a brand, which we did. Some of the results with Red Balloon by the time I left were amazing. But to then building the Big Red Group and all of the brands that exist within that, to building an amazing team, to working with just some incredible people, and really getting involved in things like transformation. Digital transformation was not something I'd seen in my career before, and was a head first dive into something incredibly complex, but really fun. And I think if you come back to what the customer needs, you can always kind of solve for that too. You're being really involved in the commercial aspect. I think commercial capable, like blending creativity and commercial, really came from my time at Big Red Group. I was very exposed to it at creative agencies to a certain extent, but working under Matt Cavalier and then obviously David Anson, the CEO there, crafted an ability to talk commercial and then land creative, which is critical in growing these big brands. So it was an amazing experience, an incredible business, and I took so much from that in terms of not just brand, but marketing more holistically, understanding commercial, scaling investments. That's really hard. Like going from $700,000 a year to 4 or 5 million a year it's a really tricky conversation to grow that line. But building trust, executing with stakeholders, working really closely with product, with technology, with the e-commerce director, all to kind of unify behind that. And then I think finally the part that I loved, which isn't marketing related per se, but really important in marketing, is the culture around leadership and how important leadership was to the Big Red Group and the exposure we had to leadership training. And then our ability to give feedback and grow as a business was amazing. Such a great experience.
How did you think about leading during that time of huge growth? I imagine when you first came in and it's a smaller team and you're setting things up, you sort of need to be a generalist across everything. And then I imagine as you've got a much larger team, you'd hire in specialists for their expertise. But that's a whole different way of managing and being okay with people being smarter than you. Tell me a bit about your journey there.
I often assume that everyone's smarter than me. That's probably the best way to start. When you're building those teams of people, and I got this advice super early on, which was like hire your gaps, and that will be such a powerful thing. And then empower those teams to do great work, which I know everybody says, but it really is about stepping back, because there's those quotes, which is the things that got you here are not the things that will get you there. And I think when you're on that leadership journey and growing teams, it's a really hard thing to do because you've got to let go of control and you have to let other people do these things. But in doing that, if you flip that on its head, what you're actually doing is empowering people to grow their own career and grow their own work, and giving them space to create incredible work as well. So if you can step back and let others do amazing things, one, you learn a lot on the way, and that is awesome. Tony, who was on here, is an incredible marketer, and I learned so much from her and her time with me, and vice versa, I think, from our conversation. So if you give people the space to do that and then hire in the specialties and let them be specialists. Sometimes we have a need to control. I think creative in your world, you can talk more about this for sure, but is often that way. People hire in creatives and then tell them how to be creative, which to me is very strange. Like, let creative people be creative, let performance people be performance people, and go from there. So I think just to sum that up, I think hire your gaps and find great people. At the core of that, they need to be curious, they need to be commercially minded, and they need to be super passionate about what they do. And then let them do it and guide them in as best you can, and bring them back to the business. But really set them free, and they'll do amazing things.
What do you think people outside of the sector might not appreciate about marketing experiences at Big Red Group?
Yeah, sure. I think this one's really fun for me, because I did the exact same thing outside in. So, oh my God, it's so fun. It's so fun. You can do all the experiences and you get this amazing content. Well, the logistics of that is so hard. Like capturing content in an experience landscape where there are thousands of suppliers all over the country. Every single one has a different requirement for capturing content, different permits, different shoot things, different places, different spaces. So I think one of the hardest things, I think, realizing is that content's really difficult, and actually content is what sells those experiences. So figuring that out was really fun from the outside in. But I think once you're in, that's one of the complexities there. And then I think the second thing is you're managing a lot of supply relationships, you're managing a lot of complexity in the marketplace, a lot of nuance in how people show up, the experience they have. I think when you go back to the core of brand, it's about kind of consistency of experience. Well, that's really hard when you don't own the last mile. So if you're showing up to a hot air balloon, but unfortunately it's windy that day, you can't come. Well, it's really hard for red balloons to then manage that experience. Say, hey, come back and book again, or do whatever it is. So I think they're probably the two big things. Is one, the logistics of the content is like way harder than I thought it was going to be, and we found ways around that. But two, managing that brand experience when you don't control the last mile is quite tricky too.
You mentioned before about becoming commercially astute or marrying creativity and commerciality at Big Red Balloon. Where did that start for you? What kind of conversations did that come up in, and sort of where's it taken you throughout your career since then?
I think it started almost straight away under Matt Cavalier, because as a chief growth officer, that's obviously where he's super focused, like brilliant and creative, and he asks incredible questions. But sometimes those questions are like really hard, and they would kind of pin you into a corner where you're like, actually, I don't know the answer to that. And some of those questions would be around, yes, I'm open to doing that work, but why? What are you going to measure for success? Where is it going to come from? How are you going to pay for it? All those kinds of things. So you got really good very quickly at one, understanding the depths of the P&L. And I think all marketers should be very deeply across how the business makes money, not just on the surface, but all the way through the complexity of that. And then kind of playing that back to the board or the C-suite, so that every piece of work you do is tied to an action. And not everything has to be revenue generating. I think that's okay too, but it has to have some payback somewhere to the business that you can articulate in a really interesting way, whether that's internally. I think is one of the biggest misses that we don't talk about sometimes, is building advocates within the business with the brand work, with the creative work you want to do, and then kind of getting that ground swell up to the executive level. And that's an interesting point from a commercial standpoint, or it is obviously the nuts and bolts of revenue or margin or improved efficiency in the channels that you play within. So every time we met with Matt for different reasons, there was a commercial conversation to be had. So I employed the same curiosity that I had with creativity to the finance piece, because I realized pretty quickly if I didn't figure that out, it was gonna undermine our success.
So tell me a bit about one of your proudest moments.
I think the one memory that instantly comes to mind was during COVID, which was an incredibly difficult time for everybody. But as a tourism business, was very challenging because everything kind of shut down. We got together as a growth team and identified that there was an opportunity here, one, to bring some excitement back to people's lives and give them the opportunity to have something to look forward to with our capability and on the e-commerce side to gift and to redeem. And two, give some hope back to the supply community while building our business back. So we pulled together a business case to go to market while all other tourism brands were kind of pulling out of the market. We wanted to go and spend in advertising dollars to rebuild kind of hope that this would happen and things would open up. So we took that to the C-suite and our CEO, David, at the time, incredibly bravely said yes, which was terrifying because he said yes. And now it's our responsibility to make this happen. So we executed it. It was some amazing work that went to market. And we actually grew coming out of COVID. So for a tourism brand at that time, it was an incredibly brave decision by the C-suite to accept that and the support of Matt Cavalier and the wider business. And then for our team to then come together and execute it and then watch that kind of pay off over time, immediate, but to watch that pay off over time for both us and our supply community was awesome. That to me was just such a come together of everyone at a really difficult time to deliver something that made an upside not only to our business but to the supply community and to the people that were shopping with us. So I'm super proud of that and how it kind of showed up for our business.
Almost counterintuitive investing, when things were locked down, and incredible to see the brand growth come off the back of it. And I guess the importance of backing yourself and taking bets.
Yeah. And the thing is that everybody says that you should always bet when the market's, quiet and you should spend when no one else is. It's really hard.
Easier said than done.
Yeah. So I think, I'm super proud that we did it. And again, David and the team signing it off was huge. But yeah, the nerves that go with it was very real. But it did open the door to lots of partnerships with Tourism Australia, Destination New South Wales, and things like that for us. So not only did it kind of help us as a business and a brand, it then opened a whole bunch of doors for us to execute other things. So I'm really glad we did it. I'm super proud of it.
Do you think taking that risk then and having such a big payoff and it working well, do you think that's made you more of a risk-prone marketer since? Do you think you take more big bets now?
I don't know if I take more big bets, but I'm more comfortable taking the big bet. I think I'm a massive believer in prioritization. I don't think you should do lots of things okay. Like I am at my core a perfectionist, unfortunately. So I think you should do one thing and do it really, really well. It shouldn't slow you down, but it should mean that you can kind of execute and do that really well and make sure that's impactful for the business and the brand before you then try and scale off significantly. So, but I'm more comfortable taking or having those kind of conversations with boards and with executives where it's like, hey, this is a risk, but here's why I think we should do it, and tying that back to the commercials of the business, but also the overarching strategy. So you should feel comfortable as a marketer taking those bets. Growing up, I used to get told, like, if it doesn't make you nervous, it's not worth doing. And I think in creativity and in marketing, that nothing is truer than that saying. Like every great campaign, every big bet, every kind of time you move to do anything of quality or size, that feeling in your stomach should like not go away.
Incredible. So why the jump over to Mabel? You moved over into Mabel and then subsequently Health Engine, Medex, had this sort of health theme throughout your recent roles. Why that first jump for you?
So after 4.5 years at Big Red Group, I thought it was time to go and try something new. I was going to take a lot of time off, take my daughter back to the UK and do some other things. And then I happened to have lunch with Matt Cavalier, the chief growth officer there, and he was like, "You should come and try and do this for us." And it was a completely different role, effectively as director of growth ventures. So they had a whole bunch of ideas, as all businesses do, right? They've got a whole bunch of ideas on how their business can grow and scale. And Matt wanted me to go there with training the CEO and effectively identify which ones would work and which ones wouldn't, and then execute on those ones that would. So it was a different role for me, but expanded the capabilities that I wanted to expand, which was that find, scale, and then kind of go from there. So we started, at Mabel, I started an e-commerce business for them, Mabel Direct. It's going really well now. I work with the Homemade team on like sales enablement and lead generation, and kind of that whole flow between Mabel and Homemade. So it really extended beyond just marketing into much more kind of matrix leadership, stakeholder management. I didn't have a team, so I was leveraging lots of other people to try and kind of like, hey, let's do this. We built a kind of a consultancy for independent living with some amazing people in the Mabel business. So it was a completely unique challenge. And to have Matt kind of be like, I really believe you can do this, was awesome. So I thought, I'll give it a go. And that was a jump into Mabel. And then once we kind of started those three big things, and then I got a call from Health Engine to say, would I go be their CMO, which was an amazing opportunity too. So Mabel was a lot of fun. And then back into the CMO position.
So you went sort of into almost an incubator within a business, developing products and solutions, and then back to marketing. What drew you to your next role at Health Engine? What kind of business did you enter? Would you call it a scale up, or was it past that size?
It's still a scale up, I think. Now, when I originally got the call about Health Engine, and spoke to Dan, who was the new CEO there, one, I was kind of blown away by Dan. Like, he is a brilliant character and a brilliant mind. So I think when you meet great leaders, like, that's always like the first step for me, is like who's kind of be there above you to help with whatever it is going to be. And I was blown away by him. And then the business challenge was totally unique to me. So they had a growth organization, but no marketing. They're a marketplace. They're 14 years old. They're kind of mixed funding. It was like really interesting. Like, this, just the complexity in this business was fascinating to me. But at the core of it, they've got a really good product. They've got a massive kind of a customer base. So my remit there was just a kind of a flip back to take a team and build a marketing function within the business, bring creativity back to the business, identify who we are and what we do and why we do it, and really identify how we sell on both sides of our marketplaces. How do I scale a SaaS model at the same time as winning in consumer acquisition? Which, the commercials are really difficult when you're trying to balance ins and outs. So it was fascinating, and there were so many kind of strategic opportunities there. And as we entered into kind of AI voice bots and other things like that, they've recently launched. It was a lot of fun. So I think for me entering that business, I was obsessed with like the challenge it faced. It was 14 years old. It's kind of how do we do this? And if I could do it, that'd be an incredible thing to kind of figure out. And after 18 months there, we turned around consumer acquisition. We built an incredible marketing team, which is still critical to their growth today. We reframed their practice positioning. There was just so much went into it. It's a great business and with some great products. But yeah, going in was a unique challenge. I'm addicted to hard things. So I was like, I don't know why I did it, but it's awesome. It was really fun.
You mentioned before about chatbots and implementing various sort of technological advancements. How do you marry that with not eroding trust when it comes to any health brand? I would imagine that trust is sort of a key component of why people keep coming back. How do you make those decisions about what works for the brand?
At the core of it, it still comes back to the customer, whether that's, like the trust pillar is always the interesting one, because trust can mean so many different things to so many different people. But to your point, it gets eroded in a heartbeat across all of those for very small reasons. So when you go back to it and you look at kind of customers' expectations, not just in health, but in any kind of environment, they're very high. And then when you get into health, it's even higher. So go right back to the core of the customer and the problem you solve for them, and then build on from that. I think where trust gets eroded pretty quickly is where, you chase the shiny thing and it kind of doesn't necessarily line up overly well with your business. And then you're solving problems that don't really fit within kind of your remit. And then that feels disingenuous. It feels like a revenue grab. And in the health space, when anything feels like a revenue grab, it instantly kind of feels wrong. So working with the product team, working with the tech team, diving in with the sales guys and the CCO there was super important that we worked really closely together to understand, like, from a marketing point of view, how do we want to frame it? What's the messaging? What's the innovation that we think is news? And then working with product technology and sales on what does that look like? How do we bring it to life? What's the pushback going to be on the practice side if we do this for patients? And if we do this for patients, what's the pushback on the practice side? And kind of balancing those two nuances under, obviously, the brand that exists for health.
Technology's never advanced as fast as it is advancing today and as it will tomorrow. Do you think the role or almost like the remit of technology is falling more into a CMO's remit? Or how do you see that relationship evolving?
It's a really interesting question. And I think that there's so much complexity in that. Marketing has its whole suite of marketing technology now that, like you said, has scaled so much faster than it ever has before. But at the core of your strategy in marketing should be to make sure that you're maximizing the ROI on the tools that you're paying for that exist within your remit, whether that is, the Brazes of the world or the Salesforce, whatever it is that kind of sit within your world. But then at the same time, like all great marketing and all great kind of teams, even if it doesn't sit within your remit, you're always kind of the customer in the room. So if you aren't controlling those technology platforms for whatever reason, and you're working with great product teams and tech teams and data teams, making sure that you guys are aligned at the core of what you're solving for will mean that even if you aren't responsible for the outcome of that piece of technology, the outcome that has an impact on the customer should be good for you. So I don't know that, I'm very adverse to this like ownership conversation, product should own this and we should be this led and so on and so forth, because it gets very complicated. Everyone needs to kind of serve the customer or be really clear on the problem they're solving and then work backwards from that. And then get the right people in the room to do the work and prioritize it. Because if it doesn't get prioritized across the business, it just won't happen.
Specifically in relation to medtech, health brands often have complex audiences. You've got patients, professionals, you've got internal stakeholders, I'm sure you've got finance people. How do you think about positioning when you're talking to many stakeholders at once?
I learned a lot actually about complex positioning at Big Red Group and then in Mabel and then in Health Engine, because you've got, exactly like you said, you've got two sides of a marketplace, but within those as well, on the Big Red Group side, you've got the person that buys it, the person that gives it, the person that receives it, and the person that does it. So, when you kind of get down into the weeds of it, there's a different solution for that. But as a brand at the top, your job as a marketer is to identify what solves the problem for all of them. Like, where is, the perfect Venn diagram for your brand at the top there? And that's so hard to do. And I think the best advice I got when I was asking questions about this when I first started Revolut and we started to move into a multi-brand environment was, and I won't swear, but he had language in it. It was like, do the work, That's what he mean. He's like, stop being lazy. Go and do the work. Like, go and find out why people buy from you, like what the market size is, where it crosses over, what about their life and their life are the same. And as boring and non-useful as that sounds to the audience, it's so true and it served me super well. It's like anytime things feel remotely complex when you're kind of dealing with multiple things, it's like, go and do the work and you'll be amazed how many times there is the crossover that exists for both sides of your marketplace or for your kind of like pathway for gifting or whatever it is that's there. And dive in and speak to people, speak to customers, speak to the stakeholders, speak to the founders, like really go and do the work, which, for you guys would be nothing new as a brand agency. But it's so, so important to go and do that. And then if you do that work, you'll find those unique positions that cross over and then you can start there. And then you can dive from there into the individuals and solve smaller underneath it. But if you don't do the work and start solving small first, it's so hard to then come back up. And I know prioritization and short versus long are always conversations in there, but trust me, your life will be much easier if you do the big one first and then solve for the little underneath it.
Love that. You recently attended AI4, the AI conference in Vegas. What drew you to attend and what were some of your key takeaways?
I was again. This is my curiosity coming out now. As with all marketers, I love shiny things. I've forced myself not to dive into shiny things too often, but AI felt like a real one, and AI 4 seemed like a big kind of global conference. So that was actually self-funded to go and do that and dive into it and kind of see how at global level AI is being discussed. You know, at a society level, at a marketing level, at a creative level, at a tech level, at an operations level, and it was so fascinating. I think I did about 40 different kind of sessions while I was there. I think I met about 81 people when I was there. It was incredibly intense, but a brilliant thing.
Sorry, hang on. How do you know you met 81 people?
Oh no, sorry, as in like one to ones with people.
I
Not
thought you
just
tried.
I've got a catcher. You know when I bump into people, that one, 81 meeting. I should be clear about that. So it was like super intense, and but it was brilliant, and it was purely driven by kind of curiosity at a global level, not just kind of what's happening here in Australia. And I think the key takeaways for me were really threefold. One, the human in the machine is critical. This kind of idea of AI utopias and agents doing everything for you and it all just kind of happening. In my view, maybe the future, who knows? But the quality control and the ability for it to do what it needs to do at a human level is not possible without human in the machine at the moment. So lead with the problem you're solving, be the human in the machine, and act more as a sparring partner than a delivery mechanic. Two, just be super curious and go and play with these tools because they will unlock so much for you. But there are so many out there that if you commit too early to one or the other or other things, you can't have figured out what's what, and don't really jump into the hype so much. Just like play and then figure out the level of capability that you can get these things to do, either with your whole business, your tech teams or other things, or just on your own with your own world, like build your AI assistant, which is like super fun to do, and see how that plays out. Or one of the things I did when I was there, we built a curious club for my daughter who's 6, and it's basically a bot that talks to her and plays games with her and kind of teaches her in a unique and kind of motivating way, which was really great. And that was kind of born off of the Alpha School stuff in the US. So just go and play, and you'll be amazed how much you can do. But it'll also open your eyes to the fact that AI really gives you an answer, not a solution. So kind of you use it as a tool, but like then go and solve it for yourself. And then the final point is that you really kind of have to understand that the pathway to building for yourself and security and other things like that all still needs to be considered. Like I think there's so many amazing tools and there's so much to do, and you can go build and you can do this, but especially in the health space or the finance space, collaborate with people that understand the security concerns within your business, because that was so much of the conversation when I was there in Vegas was, it's great, but like it now knows everything about you, or you're training a model with your business, or there's so many examples where shared links are now public and things like that. So work with people that if you are going to deploy for your business or you are going to give it information that maybe shouldn't be public, work with people that understand that, and find the tools that work in that space, and then spend the time again with those tools and those people to make sure that it's safe for your business before you go and execute anything. So I think the summary is like human in the machine is super important, and it'll be much more powerful than ever if you do that. Play with the tools, get super curious, and you'll find out pretty quickly where they can help and where they can't, and where to watch for the future. And then the third point being, like, make sure you don't give anything away that is sensitive to your business.
Yeah, almost at what cost? Making sure that it kind of sounds boring, compliance, and but ultimately, wanting to make sure that you're thinking about the long term. So where does that leave your head in terms of your marketing tech stack? I mean, you mentioned before there's so many tools, there's so many things you could do. How do you figure out the difference between the shiny new things and things that are going to give you the edge and sort of put you in front of the competition?
That's a great question. It's super complicated. And I think more than ever, you could attend a webinar every day of the week about every new tool that solves a different problem for your customers. I think like everything, start at the foundation, figure out what it is that you're trying to solve, break that down into the smallest problem or the smallest use case you can, and then solve that based on the kind of biggest outcome that you think you can get to. Definitely, and be ruthless. Like when you are going through your use cases, if it's not big enough, don't do it. Like make sure that you can find the things that will unlock different growth or different pathways for you, and start really identifying how your business makes money with these different pathways, whether that's like an experience, whether that is creative output, whether that's content, whatever it is. Start with the smallest use case you can and build from there. But at the core of your business, it has to align to your strategy. Start foundational, because it is so easy to go and do amazing things that nobody cares about, or that doesn't relate to your brand and feels disingenuous. For example, at Medex, as a brand level, we will never have AI touch the customer because the business is built from the ground up to be about the people within it and the specialty that they offer and other things like that. So don't get me wrong, we're building a lot in the background that makes that whole journey much better. But from a creative standpoint and a touch point perspective and a copywriting perspective, AI won't write that work. And it's on purpose. And it's not to say AI can't. Be super clear, it probably can. But purposefully, at the core of our business, it doesn't make sense to do that. Whereas actually in the background, some of the use cases we have solvable enough that it makes sense to invest the time there. So go back to the foundations of your business and build from your strategy.
Authenticity, I guess, being honest with yourself around what you stand for. So you're now over at MedX. Tell me a bit about the business and what drew you over.
Sure. Medix Finance is a finance broker specializing in medical finance. So working with practices, practice owners, and medical specialists, helping them secure everything from a practice finance loan to construction loan to home loans and so on. It's a really fascinating business because there are very unique offerings in the lending space for medical professionals, and they are often served with generic banks and other things that you and I would have access to, but actually they have access to a lot more. And working with Todd and Mike, the two founders, we met over dinner 2.5 years ago or something, and they're like, "We've got this idea, but we're not sure. We think there's definitely something there." And they're both super passionate and really clever guys. So I sat there with them for half an hour, and I was like, "This is cool. There is definitely something here. You're solving a real problem for the people you serve, and you're helping a really cool community." I think health is something I'm super passionate about, and the people that work in it are some of the best of us. So I was definitely interested then. At the time, though, it was very much in the background, kind of fractional for them, helping them identify, who are you? What do you stand for? How do you want to show up? All the classic things that you would help with logos and designs and websites and getting it going. And then, over the next couple of years with some input in the background, some of the tech work and, helping them go through onboarding CRMs and other stuff, to then you kind of 2.5 years later, having lent over $1 billion now at a point that we're like, okay, we're getting pretty big now, and we've gone from 2 partners to 13 brokers to 35 people to there's the momentum within the business, which is something I'm totally addicted to. Momentum, it was amazing. So that was what drew me to an end at Health Engine. There was to come back to kind of square zero as a marketer and help Medex grow to the next level of growth for them and help them scale that business kind of as a fractional CMO more than an embedded one. It's been an incredible journey for them.
Yeah, amazing. And how do you link the brand building component, sort of top of funnel, big picture stuff for Medex Finance, all the way through to your sort of more tangible metrics, especially when you're in a sector or space that it might not be as straightforward? What's your process there?
It is quite complicated because it's a really complex journey for people. But we have a range of CRM tools in the background that help us kind of connect up to customer, then through to lending portfolios, and then there are broker tools that we've built integrations for, so that our CRM will talk to those lending tools and then understand where that is. And actually, when we built the CRM, I purposely went through about 30 loan processes with different people so that I could understand how loans go from A to B to C to D and all the way through to settlement and other side. And then when we built the integration for HubSpot, I mapped exactly the same thing so that half of the problem with CRM, and any sales and marketing team will clash over this forever, but half of the problem with CRM is getting people to use the thing.
The best CRM is the one that's used, yeah.
That's exactly right. It could be anything. So I spent a lot of time with the team making sure that we could build this integration so that if anything happened anywhere, it would happen everywhere, which sounds very simple, but it's super important when we think about converting mass awareness down into, okay, this settled for X. And they're very complicated, commissions and other stuff, which is all completely transparent to the customer. So it has to be worked out ahead of time and other things. So it's a fascinating thing to connect that journey. It was a really good thing to dive into that. But I think for me, it comes right back to what I was saying before. It's like, go and do the work, because then when you build the thing, if you understand much more about the complexity of the business, you can build a much simpler process. And if you can get it simple, people will use it. And now we have a lot of data and other stuff. So it's so much more interesting now to kind of dive into that data and work with the business on that.
Yeah, amazing. If you had a year to explore one brand or marketing opportunity, what would that be for you?
It's a really great question and quite a hard one, because there are so many kind of things that knock around in my mind about that. I think the creativity is untapped in other levels, in other areas of the business. And what I mean by that is, creativity is often seen as kind of a last mile of execution when you're working as a business or in marketing teams and other stuff. And it's kind of seen as the thing you stand up in front of the organization and you show them pretty videos and other things like that. Not to undermine it, but it's such a tricky thing and pigeonholed so unnecessarily. And I was listening to a podcast the other day with the CEO of Droga 5, and he made this point too, that just because you're creative doesn't mean you're not commercial. And I think it's so true. Like if you can get creatives embedded in the business and give them unique problems to solve, like some of the ways they might solve very generic kind of boring problems would absolutely blow your mind. And we've seen this, in Adrenaline when we were redesigning the website, they had lots of different kind of takes on this. I've seen this in boardrooms where you've kind of asked for solves to like big cybersecurity problems, and the creative that was in the room came back with like a PR campaign. It's like that's the opposite of what we're trying to do, but it really worked. And so I think that's a really long way of saying I think I would try and figure out how you embed creativity as a cultural arm of the business to say, like, don't just solve what you can see. Like, can you go a bit deeper? Can you go a bit further? Can you bring somebody in that doesn't see the world the way you see the world and be open to listening to that too? Because that's hard to do as well when someone comes up with a very left, like, what? So how do you listen to those ideas and bring them in? So there's probably a bit out there, and I don't know that it would take a year, but I think it's a really fascinating thing to solve is how do you get creativity celebrated throughout the entire business?
I love that. I was nodding the whole way through. I identify with a lot of that. Years ago, I did the Stanford D School design thinking course, flipping problems on their head and sort of, completely reimagining, breaking down a problem into its parts and then putting it back together in a new way. And just the totally different paths it can take you down. And it's all just conceptual. And I think if more C-suite leaders had the confidence and the humility to lean into maybe solutions come from all different places, imagine how much further it could collectively take us in business.
Yeah. Absolutely. And from everyone, right? I think like that's what I learned the most in creative agencies about people is if you're willing to listen, they have some of the most junior or the most senior have the best ideas. And there's no shortage of ideas, but giving people the space, and we go right back to leadership, giving people the space to be great is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Who are you inspired by? Which brands do you think do brand building really well?
I think that there's so many great examples of great brand and brand building in the world. I listen to the CMO and listen to podcasts all the time, and they regularly talk about Kit Kat. I think it's such a good, like growing up in the UK, Kit Kat was awesome. It was like such a great campaign. Yorkshire Tea is another one. I was growing up obsessed with Nike, like as everyone was, right? Because I think, owning a gym and other things, it was like watching those Dream Crazy ads and stuff used to just be like amazing. So I think there's like I love all the classics as much as everybody else, and then I think I love not necessarily just the brand building, but those that kind of take a totally different approach to what brand building means. So I think you've seen the Bankwest stuff recently here in Australia. That was really interesting to me. Not I don't know if it's the greatest in terms of kind of how they landed it because the out of home has to connect to the TV and that's difficult, but it was really bold to kind of try and do something different with the brand that has been so the same for so long. Again, I think it's interesting to watch how creativity plays out. Like I have to say, the Jaguar thing was fascinating to me to watch. As a marketer, kind of on the sideline, and then listening to
The uncensored.
yeah, totally blew my mind, and it reminded me that we're so quick to kind of jump on the things without kind of going back and working back to, well, what are they trying to actually do? Like, what are they really solving for? Like maybe burning it down and starting again was the point. So that's a really long way of saying I love creativity.
I completely agree. Going in, I listened to the Uncensored CMO podcast with the Jaguar CEO, and prior to listening to it, I thought there's not much they're going to be able to say to change my mind on how much of a cluster this whole thing seemed. From yes, there was a lot of talkability and maybe there were PR dollars, but at the end of the podcast and listening to the rationale and the courage and the bravery that's undeniable in burning something down to renew was really inspiring. I didn't think I would finish listening feeling the way that I did.
Yeah, I agree. I still don't know that I like the work, but that's like totally subjective. I think that I think that's the bit like going back to your point about big bets. I'm like, wow, you want to talk about a big bet? That is it,
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating. I also find it interesting whether the PR bit was really PR or whether it was just kind of LinkedIn being LinkedIn. I was talking to my wife about it, and she was like, "What?"
Yeah,
Like, it's like, if you speak to anyone in marketing, like, oh my God. And then you speak to kind of everybody else and like, what are you on about? It's
totally. I
always
often
fun.
find that with anything to do with industry related that's hot on Mumbrella, or yeah, no one else cares, but we seem really bothered by bothered by
Yeah,
it.
totally. And it's good fun though.
Looking back at your career, how much of your decision making and leadership has been by gut feel, and how much of it has been sort of quantified by data, the science of marketing? And do you think you've shifted on that continuum over time?
I think a lot of it is definitely like hunches, just to throw the brand name in here. But the a lot of it starts with a hunch of where you want to be or a hypothesis of kind of what it is that you want to do and where you want to go, and how you feel about it. You can kind of validate that or don't validate it. I think it works out really well if you can start with a hunch and then prove it. But if you can't, like, you have to be able to put that down as well. I think early in my career, that's so hard to do because you get so wedded to these things being about you and they're nothing to do with you. So I think, that it definitely is a lot of gut. I think leadership is a lot of, I don't know if it's gut or, but, it is really listening, like empathy and kind of taking what it is. So I would say a lot of it is hunch and hypothesis, and then you validate that. But the other thing I would say is that it's amazing how quickly you can, if you really listen, you can pick up things that feel like a hunch, but actually are from data or from insight. So, I find it fascinating when you'll listen to, the data guys will tell you something, and to them, that's kind of the outcome of the work. But to you, you're like, oh, that's fascinating. Like maybe there's something in the human side of that's not the data so much. And I think you should really, like, as marketers, hone in on that a lot more. Like listen to like why things feel funny to you or sound funny to you, because if you dive a bit deeper, you can often find unique or odd things that make them feel like a hunch, but actually the reality was they were from something else. So in my career, I've definitely used data a lot more, and I think that's probably because there's a lot more tools now too. It's so much easier to validate with data or to dive into the data. Whereas back in the early days of Leo's, it was like, here's this like amazing campaign, let's see what happens. And a lot of our clients were FMCG, so it wasn't like instant result. It was like do the work and then see what happened. But yeah, a lot of it starts with a hypothesis and then moves to validate.
Tell me a bit about your approach to leadership. How do you think about building teams and high performance culture?
So I think a lot about when you can get into the weeds pretty quickly of leadership and people, but a lot of the time as a senior marketer, and especially if you're early on in your career and kind of growing, there are some things I learned along the way which were super helpful to me and have kind of come up a lot of the time, which is like in marketing, we can get lost into marketing or building brands, other things like that. But the reality is you got to think about your business, not the team. So when you're building and you're doing this work, how does this impact the business? And how do I kind of make sure that it's the right thing for the whole business, not just for the marketing team or the brand that we're building? Because you've got to bring a lot of people on that journey with you. And that's true too, then, when you think about like the team you want to build or the people you have in your business, whether that's capacity or capability that you need to bring in, is make sure that you're hiring the role, not the person, because it very quickly gets personal with people. I really like that guy, I really like that girl, she's amazing, he's whatever. And that can cloud your judgment for what it is that you actually want to achieve with that role and those finances. And especially if you're in kind of a scale-up business, you don't have the funds for kind of people that aren't nailing their specialisms. So really start with capacity, with capability, with the roles you need, and then fill those with the right people. And again, like all of that said, like focus on the outcome, not the input along the way too, so that you can build ownership within your business and really set people on a pathway to an outcome, not just like giving them the input. So let them go and find out how they want to get there rather than kind of telling them how to get there. And you'll be amazed at what comes back.
Amazing. It has been so awesome talking to you and hearing all about your career and leadership. I'm definitely struck by your humility and keen, almost like willingness to lean in and learn things that you don't yet know or understand to be able to build, better marketing teams and better structures and technology into the future. So thank you so much for joining.
No, thank you very much for having me. It's great to chat.
What I found most impressive about Matt is his humility and approach to leadership, which is empowering other people, figuring out what they're great at, being the dumbest person in the room. That married with his curiosity. I think a lot of people say they have curiosity, but to self-fund your way through an overseas course, to be able to see things from a global perspective and bring back the learnings, I think says a lot. He's clearly someone that loves a challenge, and scale-ups seem to be fit for his prowess.